Welcome back to the Try, Fail, Learn podcast. This is episode number 6, and today we are fortunate enough to have the Director of Aviation and Economic Resources for Daytona Beach International, Cyrus T. Callum. Let's get into it. Cyrus, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to tell your story and just talk about the challenges and everything that came into you being the professional you are today. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and give yourself an introduction and we'll get started.
Thanks, Joshua. So I'm Cyrus Callum. I'm currently the Director of Aviation and Economic Development for Volusia County, Florida. I oversee Daytona Beach International Airport and also Volusia County's Economic Development Department. So lots of hats, very unique position because you don't necessarily have this set up in a lot of different local governmental agencies. And I think it works because you think about what airports mean to their economy. Well, I have the opportunity here to tie both of those things together, the economy of the county and get to work with providing incentives or looking at incentives to bring in businesses in. And of course, businesses want to make sure that they have air service opportunities and they have a pipeline for getting everything that the aviation system can get out to help support their businesses. So this is a unique opportunity. I'm happy and pleased to be a part of it. And once again, just an opportunity just to learn and grow and add to my utility belt in airport management.
Absolutely. So Cyrus, if you could go ahead and tell us about young Cyrus. So when you were a kid, high school, what inspired you to go down the track towards aviation?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be in aviation in some capacity. Grew up in Denver, Colorado, right underneath the flight path at Denver Stapleton Airport at the time. So while everyone else was complaining about the noise, I actually enjoyed it. It was fascinating to me to see these large metal objects in the air making all this noise. And so at the time, I got involved with a flight club in town and started taking flight lessons, and originally thought I wanted to be an airline pilot. My freshman year of high school, United Airlines, which has their flight training center in Denver, they had an adopt a school program. And it was a community outreach program that United had, and they wanted to reach out to some of the high schools and expose the students to the aviation industry. And as a result of that, I took part of that program and ended up winning an internship with United and got to fly some of their simulators that they had at the flight training center. And from the instructors that were there, they were saying, "Oh, this kid's taking a graduate course and he hasn't been to kindergarten yet." And, I had just started flight lessons. Of course, I didn't have my pilot's license, just basics in terms of ground school and, just learning how to do touch and goes. And then here I am flying a 727 simulator, things that would normally cost, hundreds of dollars an hour for people that have, their multi-engine ratings and their commercial pilot's license and commercial certificate. And here I am, I'm flying this hardware but amazing experience, and exposed me to the industry to help me realize whether or not I wanted to just be full in on it, to start to put pieces in place to look at universities that had curriculum and different criteria requirements in order to go that path. And so great program. The other thing that came out of that, being part of that program, we got exposed to the airport planning environment, because at the time Denver International Airport was being planned, and got to learn a lot about what went into that. So in the back of my mind, there was always an interest in, well, maybe if this pilot thing doesn't work out, maybe I can get involved in airport planning and airport management. And so I kind of sparked that fire to get involved in the industry that way. So I always knew I wanted to do something with aviation, something to do with airports, whether or not it was flying or just working at an airport on a day in, day out basis, or helping airports as they continue to develop and evolve.
Gotcha. And so that went into college when you went to college and you have a degree. What is your major in?
Right. So I majored in aviation management. I went to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. They had a relationship with United Airlines as well, because at the time I was still kind of on the fence on whether or not I wanted to fly. So I got involved in the aviation flight program and continued through their program as a kind of like an ab initio setup where, they start you from ground school, even though I'd already had my license heading in at the time. They set you up on the way that they want you to be trained and so forth. And so I was able to kind of build flight time and get confidence in that arena. But I ended up doing an internship once Denver International Airport opened up. I did an internship there, and I was hooked because that exposure when I was in that United Airlines program when Denver International was being planned, the exposure to that process and doing that internship after the airport was complete, it just further submitted for me that desire to want to continue to be a part of the day-to-day operations and I guess facility development and so forth as it related to airports. So great opportunity. Actually got to live at home with the folks while I worked at the airport on a Monday, Friday, 8 to 5 basis, getting that full on real world experience in airport management. And so I've stuck with it ever since.
Mm. So what brought you down to Florida?
A lot of things. So family situation brought me to Florida. The other thing too, a lot of my friends that I grew up with in Denver ended up going to college in Florida. So Florida A&M University. My sister went to Bethune-Cookman University. I had a lot of friends that ended up at Embry-Riddle, Florida State. And so when I was in Carbondale, usually on spring break, I would drive down to Florida and, stop in Tallahassee, hang out with that segment, and then go over to Daytona Beach and hang out with that segment. So, it's just ironic as much as I was hanging out and doing the spring break thing in Daytona Beach when I was in college, I never would have thought that I would end up being the top aviation official some 25 years down the line. But
Yeah.
sometimes life is it throws you some interesting storylines. And so I was happy to see it back then and happy to see how the community has grown up from there.
Yeah. So let's talk about AAA. So in the episode with Diane Cruz, she talked about getting her her AAE, I guess being a part of AAE, the organization, which stands for
It's the American Association of Airport Executives. And so the designation that you get is the accredited airport executive. You'll see a lot of us, we have the AAE after our name. And, there's a lot of different certifications you can get. But I say the AAE is probably the most recognizable. It's probably the most popular. And for a lot of people, it's probably the most challenging to receive because it's a 3-step process. And Diane, she earned her AAE, and I've sat on many panels with Diane to help pull other people across that finish line. So she's been definitely a great help in that regard, and just a great friend, a great neighbor through her tenure at Sanford when I was in Orlando. So.
Yeah. So with AAAE, I see that when did you go through the process of getting that certification? At what stage in your career?
So I actually started the process when I was in Jacksonville. I was in Jacksonville, Florida, both in the private sector and then back into the public sector. I got with an airport planning firm or an airport, or, well, actually they did more than airports, but my specialization at the time at this firm, Reynolds Smith and Hills, was airport planning. And I started the process going through the written exam. They call it the Certified Members Exam. And it's 180 questions. You got to get 70% of the multiple choice questions correct. And they pretty much just throw tons of theory and tons of technical data at you to show that you have some competency in recognizing different things and regulations and processes as it relates to dealing with the airport on a day-to-day basis. So got through that process while I was a consultant, and then ended up getting with the Jacksonville Aviation Authority shortly after I earned the CM, and then I completed the accreditation at that time in 2007. And so, the process, it takes a lot of time, a lot of study, a lot of dedication. I was fortunate to have wonderful mentors through the process. Danette Bewley, who to this day is still one of my trusted mentors in my network. She happened to be the airport director in Jacksonville. She ran the day-to-day for Jacksonville International Airport at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. And so she was on the board of examiners. And so that helped because I had a clear line of communication with her. She knew my goals and aspirations. She knew I wanted to get through the process the first time. And so she made sure that I was prepared and sat through the final interview. Scott Brockman was on my panel, Lou Bledweiss from Asheville, Scott Brockman's from Memphis, and then Tommy Bibb, formerly from Nashville, was on my panel. And, we rocked it, got through in about 90 minutes and, got to wear that AAE badge. And, I wear it on my sleeve. Anybody that talks about me, that's probably one of the things they say. I promote the program. Currently the chair of the board of examiners as it stands, and so we make sure that the process is rewarding. We make sure that it keeps up with our dynamic industry. We make sure that we're putting best management practices and tactics and best processes out there for the membership and the candidates to go through the program. And, I definitely am proud to champion that effort. So, I pull a lot of people through the process. I pull a lot of people that get through the program back on the panel so they can actually see the other side of the table and help other people through the process. And, I set very ambitious goals for the rest of the board of examiners because we want to make sure that the program is keeping pace with our membership, but more importantly, keeping pace with the industry.
That's awesome. I remember when I was an operations coordinator in Sanford, I had just learned about AAE, and I was like, I wonder if that's something that I could pursue in getting AAE certified. And so I looked into it, and somebody told me like, nah, man, you're way too low they'll never even talk to you. Is that something that somebody in the lower ranks of airport management, somebody like an operations coordinator or operations manager, should seek out doing for a career in aviation?
Absolutely. That person gave you horrible advice. If you have that ambition and you have that time and dedication, from day one, you can start studying for the process because it's going to take that amount of time to gather all of the knowledge base that you need in order to be successful through the program. And it forces you to look out and seek mentors that will help you through the process as well. So I would recommend anybody, day one, you get into the airport business, or even in college, you can start on studying for the certified members exam. That's the first step of the 3-step process. I tell everybody, I did it when I was a consultant. I wasn't even in airport management at the time when I got the CM. So you definitely, any opportunity to take a shot at the exam or take a shot at studying for the materials, definitely I would never discourage anybody from wanting to start that process. So the thing about the aviation industry, we're going through another metamorphosis, of
Right.
course. You know, deregulation in 1978 that spurred changes, different fluctuations in the economy in the 80s. And then, of course, 9/11's changed a lot of the landscape in the airport arena, and then the Great Recession. And then here we are with the pandemic. Eventually, there's going to be a need to come back and support airports, and we're going to be looking for qualified people that have background knowledge on best practices and how to run airports safely and responsibly. So there's definitely going to be a need for people with your experience. I mean, no one can take away that operations experience that you had in Sanford. I mean, it's real world, and you can definitely put that to use at any facility. But definitely, when we rebound, which is going to happen, the pilot shortage is real, but they're looking at ways to be creative on how to put some of these flight crews back in the air, and we got to have responsible people on the ground that are able to make sure that 139 is followed to a T to make sure that those flights are operating on an airport that's safe. And so, one piece of advice that I would give you is you don't have to be at an airport to go through the certified members program. You can, as long as you're a member of the AAE and you pay for the materials, you can take that exam and have that CM after your name, because the whole reason why we designed it that way is so we would give people that weren't in the day-to-day management of an airport an opportunity to still be able to converse or still have an opportunity to put a foot in the door for future opportunities. And it even further shows that interest in our industry that way. I tell you, if I'm looking at a candidate to interview and I see that you have a CM after your name, I'm putting you one step higher than the candidate that doesn't have it.
Gotcha. That's what I always loved about AAAE is the education that's provided and the opportunity to people is it stands apart from a lot of higher education programs in that it is very applicable education. What I
Right.
found is you get into a lot of higher education that teaches you a lot of generic or general knowledge, but AAA is very specific and very up to date with things as they change. And so, one thing you have on your title is ACE. Can you talk about what that is?
So ACE programs, the ACE, Airport Certified Employee Program, was something that AAA developed for those people that worked in the airport industry, or maybe you're a consultant, or maybe you just have an interest in airports. And maybe you don't want to go through the full CM or AA process. Of course, you wouldn't be able to go through the AA process unless you actually worked at an airport. But maybe you don't want to go through that because your interest is in just airfield operations, or your interest is in airfield electrical maintenance, or finance, or uh, trusted agent, or security. And so these programs in ACE are aligned just for people that want to stay within a particular specialization. And the tests, the programs, they're still challenging. A lot of the ACE programs, they'll require the candidate to go through a multiple choice exam and get 70%, similar to the CM, but it gives people an opportunity to have some credentials after their name and a particular specialization that they can use in order to be competitive, or just to, share knowledge. A lot of different airports, they'll require their airfield operations employees that are responsible for 139 to all go out and get their ACE, just to show that there's an understanding in what's required for Part 139. There's no confusion with regard to the standards. And I think that's a a really good business practice for the airports to do so. But there's a variety of different ACE programs out there to suit whatever particular airport professional or consultant's needs. So finance, I think there's an international one, there's trusted agent, there's security, operations, airfield operations anyway, airfield electrical, which, you know, a lot of airports, they make their licensed electricians go through that process because, you know, there's some nuances and different things that are very unique for airports that people kind of need to pay attention to, and this kind of checks
Right.
that box and shows that they have that background knowledge. We're actually working on an ACE program that deals with airport planning, and
Oh,
so
okay.
we're in the infancy stages of that. The ACE Finance just actually rolled out not too long ago, and you know we're getting some good reviews with regard to that. So just different avenues and opportunities to allow people to still show that they have knowledge of a particular subject, but maybe they don't want to go through, you know, the whole enchilada that is the CM and the AAE program.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's start after Jacksonville. Speaking of specialization, after Jacksonville, you came over to Greater Orlando Aviation Authority
Right,
as their noise abatement officer.
right.
So, can you talk about that? Because I don't see that wasn't like a major of yours, or there's nothing in there before that about noise abatement. So, can you talk a little bit how you got into that, and then what it is?
Well, you're probably going to hear me talk about networking a lot as we go through this process here, and from my network that I was able to build with Danette Bewley, who, as I mentioned before, was my mentor through the AAE program. She introduced me to a good friend of hers named Parker McClellan. And he, at the time, was director of airports for GOA, Greater Orlando Aviation Authority. And we were at a AAA conference in DC. And at the time, I was wanting to kind of spread my wings a little bit. I kind of got to a point in Jacksonville where I was doing operations, I did business development and properties, but I wanted to spread my wings and learn a little bit more about the industry. And ended up having a good conversation with Parker. And Parker said, "Well, I have a noise abatement position that I'm getting ready to post." And I thought, you know, noise abatement, that add another tool to my belt, and you know, get involved with the community and learn a different function of airport management that may help me work and deal within political environments. And you know, that was one of the different skill sets that I was missing at the time. And you know, I thought it was a welcome challenge. So I ended up getting that job, and you know, noise abatement is definitely a learning experience. I would never discourage anybody from doing it because, for one thing, it really helps you learn how to exist within a situation where you are representing something that's very unpopular to the people that you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But you have to find a way to talk people off the ledge and try to help them understand why the conditions are what they are. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of go out and educate people about aviation, about airplanes, about processes that, you know, the FAA are required to go through with regard to separation of aircraft, flight tracks, and different things. But then also present these things and these tactics to a lot of politicians, a lot of political leaders in jurisdictions that are adjacent to the airport that are affected by it and may not benefit from having the economic benefit of that airport being in their community, but they still have to suffer through some of the results of the aviation activity. And so, definitely a skill set I didn't have going into that position, but I was able to cultivate, and I believe to this very day helped me get to where I am. You know, because now I'm consistently within a political environment where I have to talk to policymakers about different things that may be within the airport's control or out of the airport's control, but try to make sense of that and then learn how to talk to people about that in a layman's type level. So, yeah, noise definitely prepared me for that, and was a really good experience. Now, I will say this: noise has a shelf life because you can only come into work for so long and just hear, so much about what it is that you're doing that is causing somebody a trauma and pain from their
Yeah.
perspective. But definitely, you go through that 4 or 5 years, you get enough, you work up enough patience to be able to kind of go to public workshops and talk about things, or, you got different media outlets that ask you questions about just aviation in general. And, it's fun, but yeah, definitely, it definitely has this shelf life.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first realized what noise abatement was, I was still, on the ramp, and
Mhm.
Kevin Thompson, who is now,
Yeah,
or I think he just moved up from noise abatement
right,
over at
right.
Orlando, and
Yeah.
he was showing me all kinds of diagrams and all these things about how the noise goes through. So a little background. So I grew up on Sanford property.
Okay.
We rented a house from the Sanford Airport Authority, and
Nice. So
we
you were a
hardly.
tenant,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah. For 18 years, I grew up there.
Wow. Wow.
So we hardly ever heard airplane noise.
Yeah.
Hardly ever, because we're tucked real close but real low. So
Yeah.
most of the buildings were blocking out a lot of the noise. Every once in a while we hear real low rumble and know something
Right.
big had come to Sanford.
Right.
But we had friends that lived underneath the flight path of takeoffs and landings, and the noise was absolutely outrageous. I mean,
Yeah.
crazy loud. And when he was showing me all these diagrams of how the noise, passes, and we one time had to ground an MD-80 that was leaving
Yeah.
Sanford because the local ordinances where they were at didn't allow it to land after such a time, because
Oh,
MD-80s were so
jeez.
much louder than
Yeah.
Airbus aircraft. And so just an interesting world of aviation where you don't really think about it. What I mean? It's like it's an airport, it's loud, but there are regulations and things that prevent you from doing certain things. So, yeah, I couldn't imagine holding that position, having to explain all that to people and deal with that side of it. But let's talk
Yeah.
about your time with Orlando and how
Right.
you kind of developed and the things that changed. And before you came over to Daytona, you were the director of the Orlando Executive Airport. So can you talk a little
Right.
bit about how you came into that position?
Right. So, when I left noise abatement, I moved over to take on the assistant director of airport operations, overseeing landside operations in the terminal. And once again, these opportunities for me were more about adding additional tools to my utility belt to try to be the most complete airport manager that I could be. And one thing that I didn't have in noise abatement was a staff. And so I wanted to look at what I needed to do in order to deal with employees and deal with those HR issues that may come up, and employee interaction and so forth. And so the landside gave me the opportunity to do that. At the time when I was there, it was the largest in the operations department in terms of the number of employees. I think I was responsible for about 110 employees at the time. And, I
And this
had
was not the executive?
and not at the executive, not yet, but this was one of the things that helped prepare me for the executive airport. And
Gotcha.
so, because I don't think I would have been as effective at executive airport had I not learned skills on how to uh, deal with employees
Right.
as effectively as a lot of the situations that were presented. And of course, you learn a lot about yourself. You make mistakes, and you learn from the mistakes, and you go with the guidance of HR in terms of policies. And of course, a lot of organizations, they'll have labor unions and contracts and different things that you have to follow. And with the staff that I had in Landside, none of those employees were unionized. And so, we had to go through certain processes that were set up, through the state, and some policies that were set up through GOA. So Did that for a good number of years and got some really good experience. And the longtime airport director at Executive Airport was getting set to retire. And Phil Brown, the chief executive officer at GOA, approached me and asked, okay, well, uh, we've had conversations about me and general aviation. I've always been a user of general aviation since I've had my pilot's license. Always any opportunity to fly, I'd take it. And so I've expressed interest in going to executive, but Mr. Brown had presented me with an opportunity and said, well, which would you rather? Would you rather be director of operations at Orlando International Airport, or would you rather be the director at Executive Airport? And I jumped right at Executive Airport because at Orlando International, for me, being the director of operations, of course, large hub airport, access to all of these airlines and all of these challenges. But when you go through the accredited airport executive process, I mean, you're dealing with finance, admin, planning, construction, environmental operations, maintenance, security, and community relations, and you name it. And I wanted to exercise all those things that I learned from going through that process. So easier for me to do that at executive airport, wear these hats and do these things, whether it be capital development, whether it be commercial development, because Orlando Executive Airport at the time, 60% of the revenues that were generated came from commercial properties that weren't even aeronautically related. And so I really wanted to have that opportunity to do that. And so when Kevin McNamara, who was the director at the time, retired, I jumped right on it. And, probably one of the best decisions I've made in my career, and enjoyed every minute of it. I mean, just, that airport has a very unique place in my heart for, all things that it is. I mean, it's right in the heart of Central Florida. I don't even say it's in the heart of Orlando. It's right in the heart of Central Florida. And, just going out and talking about how important general aviation is to the national airspace system and, all the things that it can be. I mean, just being able to champion that effort as much as I championed the accredited airport executive designation. I mean, that was definitely a pleasure to do. So much, we got some great work done. We were able to take on some capital projects that we were handcuffed for so many years. We were able to kind of pull off a runway incursion mitigation program that really set the stage for all of the development that's taking place now. And as a result, was lucky enough to get the General Aviation Airport Manager of the Year award from the FAA Southern Region. But I can't take credit for that. I would say it was my team, because we came up, we were visionaries, all of us together, came up with some ideas of how we were going to get that project done. And we all worked together to make sure that that came to fruition. And so to this day, I share that award with every 15 of the employees that we had there that worked for GOA at Executive Airport. I shared that award with them. So, yeah, it was a great experience. Great experience. Very difficult to leave the place, but once again, to take on this new challenge and coming to Volusia County and being a part of this unique but exciting aviation and economic development department, and with all of the things that we have on the horizon that are here. I mean, some of the decisions that we're on pace to make is really going to set this place up for the next 20 years. And I'm excited to be on the front end of that.
One thing that I'm hearing a lot from your story, and I won't ask you how old you are, but
you see the gray hair, man.
you're older than me. And what I love about hearing your story is the tenacity that you still have. I mean, I've talked to several people who the role of director of operations at Orlando International would have been the dream, right? And
Yeah,
they would have
yeah,
gotten that position. And I know several people that would have just given up, like, okay, I've made it. I'm done. I'm just gonna serve my time here, retire, and move out to somewhere quiet. And even the position that you had at executive. I mean, I know so many people who had lower positions than that and were content, and they just said, "Nah, I'm good. I'm done." And even to move on to now Daytona, like you are tenacious and always wanting more and always hungry.
right.
Um, I think that's great. I mean, a lot of I think it especially plagues the aviation community, and I think that lack of determination comes from how many things you have to manage all at once,
Right.
and you talked about managing employees and learning how to lead staff, and that is a unique thing to do in
Yeah.
aviation, just because of how diverse the responsibilities are. I talked to George Speak and Diane Cruz,
Yeah.
both said the same thing. There's just a lot of things that you have to know. Can you talk though a little bit about the challenges? I love that you said that you owe that award to your staff and your team. That's a mark of a true leader right there, understanding
Thank
that,
you.
you're not the only one working, that you may be the leader, but you couldn't do anything without your team. But could you talk a little bit about the struggles and the lessons that you learn? You talked about, you make mistakes and you learn from them. Can you talk about the lessons that you learned as a result of moving into different positions of leadership, but also just moving into positions where, and I don't know if I'm sure you have felt like this at times, um, like you were not prepared for the
Yeah.
curveball that you were served.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that I definitely I go through that with the challenges that I'm faced in Daytona. It's like, whoa, okay, I didn't see that coming, but you take it in stride. Yeah, just coming up, and I'll say, from Denver to I did a stint in Chicago. Um, for their Department of Aviation through Landrum and Brown, and then Reynolds Smith and Hills, then Jacksonville Aviation Authority. It's tough because you want to learn as much as you can. You want to get involved with it as much as you can, and oh, I won't even say the generation that's behind me. I mean, I had the same issue. I was very impatient. I
Mm,
wanted these results now, and you look and you see some of your peers that you've graduated college from, or that you may have done internships, or you run into at conferences, and you see them uh, getting these airport leadership opportunities, and you're thinking, okay, well, I've done everything that they've done. What did I do wrong?
mm,
And really, this industry, just like in lots of other industries, it's all about timing. What I tell people is you need to be prepared. You need to do everything that you should do in order for when that door opens up, you're ready. And the people that are helping you through that door, you've justified everything that they're doing to help you. And so when I tell a lot of people, that are starting out, they instantly want to be the airport director at some, large hub, Chicago O'Hare or Atlanta. That you got to be realistic. These things take time, but they take timing
mm,
at the same time. Just because you're ready doesn't mean that that job that's right for you is ready for you. And
mm,
so, in the meantime, what you should do is get all the education that you can get, whether it be a master's degree, and then your certifications, whether it be, your AAE, if you can max out there. If you're fortunate enough, you got somebody financially supporting you to go through the international airport professional designation, because it's kind of costly. Um, but the aces that are out there, is some people look at, okay, yeah, you're giving money to AAA, but no, what you're really doing is you're opening up your span of knowledge in particular subject matters that are only going to help you. And these are things that can't be taken away from you unless you fall and you hit your head and concussion and you lose all that stuff. That stuff's going to stick with you. And so every opportunity to learn, every bit of moisture you can soak up with regard to knowledge, when that job opportunity is ready, and once you've nurtured your network to the point to where that supports you when you're ready, then that job will be there. You just need to make sure that you're prepared. And so you'll hear I take feedback from the different search consultants that I've interviewed with, or different organizations I've interviewed with for jobs, even jobs that I knew I didn't want. I wanted to interview just so I can have a conversation about the industry and learn about what that expectation is for that job, so then I can apply that for another job interview that I would be interested in. These are things that you want to take advantage of as often as you can. And so one of the pieces of feedback that I got back from one of the executive search consultants when I was doing noise abatement and interviewing for a job, and was unsuccessful. He said, "Well, you don't have anything documented that shows that you know how to manage people." So within Goa, I took advantage of every opportunity that I could that would give me the ability to learn how to manage people. And that's a skill that has to be acquired. I mean, there's going to be situations that you're put in where, one size is not going to fit all. I mean, you're going to have to, handle a particular employee issue. HR used to tease me a lot because they said I always wanted to wear my white hat. I never wanted to put on the black hat. And, the black hat, that coincides with you having to be a disciplinarian and understanding rules and policies of your organization. Sometimes you have to come down with the hammer, right? But what I tell people is, just because you have to do that, you don't have to be harsh about it. You really, sometimes the message is all about the delivery, and you learning how to talk to people and learning how to explain certain things to people with the importance of what it was, or the issue that transpired, how that would be negative for that organization, or how that policy was violated. I mean, you can explain that to people without being nasty about it. And so I learned those skills, and I learned how to talk to people, how I would want to be managed in certain situations, and I just made sure that I applied those skills that I learned. So after taking that advice and getting exposed to managing people, when the next job opportunity came up, or a different situation came up, I was ready. And that resonated through from my employees, giving me feedback on different things that they liked about how I was managing a particular situation. And getting employee feedback is probably the most important, because you want to make sure that you're giving them everything that they need. And it goes both ways. I mean, you want your employees to be good employees, but your employees want you to be a good manager. They want you to be a good boss. And so
Right.
you want to make sure that you have that constant dialogue, that constant relationship. And just like with any relationship, you want to nurture it, you want to continue to build. And if you do make a mistake, or you do come off cross given a certain situation, be able to own it and apologize, and seek different ways on how you can improve and be better. And there's nothing wrong with admitting failure for that, because of course what comes from failure is growth.
Absolutely. Tell me, what is the worst advice anybody ever gave you?
One former who's kind of a mentor today. I was told at the time, I was an ops person, and I was told no need to get involved with helping these political officials. You'll never be in that arena because you don't have the knack, and you'll never be an airport director because you don't have the political knack. And I grinned that off today because I'm sitting in this seat.
That's what you do.
Yeah, and it actually fueled me. It's
Mm,
kind of like, my favorite basketball player was Kobe Bryant,
mm,
and bless his soul. I mean, I still look at different comments and different you know clips on TikTok and different things of Kobeisms, and
mm.
one said, he was playing Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan hit a last minute shot, and of course, he ended up beating Kobe and the Lakers. And Jordan went up to Kobe afterwards and said, "You may try, but you will never fill my shoes." And so Kobe just kind of took that and said, "Okay." And the next week of practice, all the other Lakers, they're, "Well, what's wrong with Kobe? Kobe hadn't said a word since we lost to the Bulls." And or maybe that was when Michael was with the Wizards. But he's like,
Mm.
Kobe hadn't said a word since we lost to Michael Jordan. And Phil Jackson said, "Yeah, that's because Michael said something to him." And so they were like, "Well, I feel bad the next time we play Michael Jordan." And Kobe went berserk, scored 50 points on Michael. And so I'm
Wow.
similar. I'm similar to that because yeah. If you're gonna tell me that I can't do anything, that's great because you just put that idea in my head, and so now I'm gonna find, not one way, but multiple ways to get it done. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate him for saying that and fueling me because
Mm.
yeah, I probably wouldn't have had as much tenacity to be where I was. I was told that you know didn't need to be on the board of examiners, and here
Mm.
I am. I've helped over 100 candidates, and we're on the verge of getting 500 uh, double AEs, which is a number that's
Wow.
never been heard of. And had I not had that, who knows where we'd be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. So what is the best advice you ever got?
Uh, Nurture your network. You
Mm,
can never understate the value of having a strong network. I tell you, the reason I got this job in Daytona was a result of my network, and it was
mm,
actually the result of me hiring a guy in Orlando and cultivating a relationship with him. And he moved over to Daytona and made an excellent rapport with the county management. And when the director of aviation was retiring, um, uh, this guy who moved on to the private sector, the county manager called him and said, "Hey, who do you know would be a great instant fit for this job?" And
mm.
he immediately said me. And he didn't have to. It was just a result of the network. And then there's so many different examples of this. I mean, me being the chair on the BOE, it came from the network that I was able to establish. And you continue to build on that network. You help people when somebody calls and they need advice, or somebody has a question about something. And, you find a way to make yourself available, kind of like you and me, as hard as I am to catch. It definitely, you want to cultivate and build on these relationships in the industry because, you just never know on the back end on how that's going to affect a future move. And nine times, I want to say 99 times out of 100, it's going to be positive. So
Mm,
it's just best to engage and be involved and just nurture this network because it's a small industry. It's a very small industry. You don't want to burn any bridges. And, in order for us to take, airports where they need to be and have them continue to be as impactful as they are on the communities that they serve, it takes, networking and ideas and sharing best practices. And there's no better way to do that than having a good, solid network. So that was great advice.
And that is a wrap for this episode of the Try, Fail, Learn podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and review. We'll catch you next time.